Hello, this is Jessica Taguding. I'm a Senior Data Analyst at DC PCSB, and in this training, I will be discussing the discipline data collection for school year 2020-2021. Today, we'll cover the collection schedule for the discipline data. We will cover changes for this school year. We'll cover completing the data sharing declaration and the monthly upload steps. At the end of this video, you will be prepared to complete the DC PCSB monthly discipline data submission. So to start, per the DC PCSB data and document submission policy, discipline data must be submitted 14 days after the end of that month. Therefore, the due date is generally the 14th of the month or the next business day if the 14th falls on a weekend. If you've never read the data and document submission policy, you can find it on our website. It is a useful reference for understanding expectations in terms of LEA discipline, or data, including discipline, but also other data as well, like attendance and enrollment data throughout the year. So the collection dates for this year are listed below. I will note that the first submission due date has been pushed back to October 28th. So your discipline data for August and September will be due on October 28th, and that is delayed since, of course, we are running a bit behind schedule this year. We wanted to wait until OSSI had released their guidance to make sure that we were in alignment. So now that OSSI has released their guidance, we've updated our guidance, and we pushed back the first submission due date to reflect that delay. So throughout this presentation, I will be talking about the Discipline Hub. And what I mean by that is within the Hub, which is at dcpcsb.quickbase.com, there is a button for Discipline, which will have everything that you need to complete, review, and validate your discipline data this year. When you click on the Discipline button, this is what you should see, something very similar to this. So to start, I want to direct everyone's attention to the submission guidance link. I'm going to be discussing and referencing the submission guidance throughout the presentation. If you click on this link within the Hub, you will be taken to the updated guidance for this year, 2020-2021. So it has been updated to reflect expectations and guidelines for this year. Now let's discuss the changes for school year 2020-2021. So the template and guidance for submitting discipline data to DC PCSB are going to be really similar to what they were last year, 1920. However, there are a few changes that are affecting the scope of reported incidents and the way that data are collected and shared. And I'm going to briefly talk about all 5, and then I will go into each in greater detail. So quickly, the first and really the biggest change is about reporting instances in which students are excluded from participating in synchronous distance learning opportunities for disciplinary infraction. The second is a couple of updated options for the field, did student have disability at the time of the incident? The third is around data sharing with OSSI on a more frequent basis. The fourth, again, is about data sharing, basically saying if you opt in for all records. And the fifth is a minor change to the template in the first column. So in order to really dig into each of these changes, I'm actually going to go ahead and switch over to the discipline submission guidance document. So this is what you'll see if you click on the submission guidance link in the Hub. And we've talked about the collection schedule, and I'm coming down here to changes for 2020-21. So to start, reporting exclusions during distance learning. Obviously, with COVID-19, probably everyone listening to this training right now is operating in a largely remote environment. Now, OSSI's updated 2021 discipline collection guidance is very clear about how that impacts discipline. Essentially, disciplinary actions that are taken in response to incidents that occur during synchronous instruction in a distance learning setting must be reported as an exclusion. So this text here is taken pretty much exactly from OSSI's guidance. If you have not already read OSSI's collection guidance for this year, I highly encourage you to do so. It's very informative and it has a lot of information about exclusions during distance learning. So the key takeaway here is that, disciplinary actions taken during distance learning must be reported as exclusions. And they provide some examples, such as removing a student from their regular distance learning classroom, moving a student to a different distance learning classroom, or removing students' access to their regular classroom teacher or peers. OSSI's guidance goes on to clarify that there are certain temporary actions that do not need to be reported. For instance, if you mute a student during their distance learning class, if you restrict a student's video privileges or prevent a student from typing a response, those do not constitute exclusions. So those do not have to be reported. So you'll see the DC PCSB template has been updated so that disciplinary action taken has exclusion. So you can select exclusion and then you fill out the other fields like you normally do. So that's exclusion, and you are expected to report exclusions in your monthly submission to PCSB. So we are expecting that any instances such as these defined by OSSI will be included in your monthly submission to PCSB. The next change is a couple of updated options for the field, did student have disability at the time of the incident? So this is a change that OSSI requested. So in the field, did the student have a disability at the time of the incident? Instead of just being a yes, no, there are now 3 options. So no, or you can say yes, the student was a student with disability, or yes, the student was suspected of being a student with a disability. So you will see those changes reflected in our template here. No, yes, and yes. The next change I want to talk about is about data sharing. Actually, the next 2 relate to data sharing with OSSI. So at the end of the year last year, if you were around and overseeing discipline data for your LEA, you'll recall that there was a data sharing declaration that you completed stating whether or not you were allowing PCSB to submit data to OSSI on your behalf. After you completed that, we did a one-time data share with OSSI. OSSI has requested that we provide discipline data on a more frequent basis with the understanding that those are going to be unvalidated data. So during the first submission, which is due on October 28th, you will be asked to complete the data sharing declaration indicating whether or not you want PCSB to include your discipline records in our sharing with OSSI, or if you prefer to be the sole provider of discipline data to OSSI. So if you don't want PCSB sharing your data, then it just means that you certainly at the end of the year and potentially during the year will be asked by OSSI to provide those data. And instead of having PCSB just share what you share with us, you would have to separately share that directly with OSSI. So I am going to go over how to do the data sharing declaration later on, in case you were not here last year to do it. But just know that that has moved up. Instead of being something you do at the end of the year, it's something you're going to do at the beginning of the year in your first submission. The next point is also related to that data sharing. This is just a clarification that starting this year, any records that you submit to PCSB will be shared with OSSI if you opt into the data sharing agreement. So in the past, to kind of clarify, PCSB does not require school-based intervention nor in-school suspension records. That continues to be the case. So you do not have to submit in-school suspensions or school-based intervention data to PCSB. This is an area of somewhat misalignment between PCSB and OSSI. OSSI does require those elements. Now, the reason PCSB does not ask you to tell us about your school-based interventions and your in-school suspensions is because PCSB feels that the definition is not yet sufficiently clear as to what constitutes those types of actions. And so we can't really report on them with fidelity because we don't have confidence that all schools are using the same definition. So because of that, PCSB does not require in-school suspension and school-based intervention data. However, for their federal reporting requirements and also the new local laws around discipline, OSSI does ask schools to report on school-based intervention and in-school suspension to them. They generally ask this once at the end of the year. So schools, charter schools, you always have the option of reporting those to us. So it is in our template. If you want to, you can report on in-school suspensions. You can report on school-based interventions. If you do that, then you'll basically be all set to meet OSSI's requirements at the end of the year. But, like I said, you don't have to. It just means that you'll have to work with OSSI at the end of the year to either certify that you don't have any of those types of records or send them to OSSI directly. The reason this is in the changes section is because in the past, when schools have opted into the data share, we've gone an extra step to say, do you also want us to include in-school suspensions and school-based interventions? This year, it's really just like a binary yes, no. If you opt into the discipline data share, we're going to share all of your records with OSSI, including any in-school suspension or school-based intervention records that you might share with us. So we're not going to double check. We're just going to say if you opt in totally. And if you opt out totally. It's not going to be like opting in for out-of-school suspensions, but not for in-school suspensions. So that's the change here. And the last change, this is very minor. PCSB recently made a change in our systems that caused the name of the collection to change. So this first field used to just say discipline. Now it says discipline records. So of course the template's already been adjusted. So if you download the template, you'll see it says discipline records. But I know some of our schools have systems that export records based on your student information system or a tool that you're using. If that's the case, just make sure that collection type, the very first field, says discipline records, not just discipline. Otherwise, it might not, it won't come through. It'll get lost. Our system won't know what type of data you're uploading. So it's really important to make sure this says discipline records instead of just discipline. If you want more information on any of these changes, I definitely encourage you to read this guidance document. I also, like I said, encourage you to read OSSI's guidance so that you fully understand what an exclusion is and what the expectations are there. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next section. Okay, so now let's shift gears and talk about completing the data sharing declaration. Again, you're going to go to the hub. You are going to click on discipline. And this time you are going to click discipline data sharing declaration and validation form. That's going to take you to a screen where you are going to see your LEA name in the school year 2020-2021. And once you click on it, you will see a page with 3 sections: data sharing declarations, data quality errors, and discipline validation. Right now, we're only interested in the data sharing declarations. The validation happens still at the end of the year. The declaration has been shifted to the beginning of the year. So, this is where you clarify whether or not PCSB can share your records with OSSI. Generally, it's defaulted to DC PCSB can share discipline data with OSSI directly on the LEA's behalf. If you do not want PCSB sharing your discipline data with OSSI, you need to click the little pencil that says Edit and modify the declaration. So when you click on that, you can see on this screen, you'll have the option to change here to PCSB cannot share discipline data with OSSI directly. The LEA will send discipline data to OSSI directly, and it cuts off, but it basically says using OSSI's template and meeting their expectations. So if you don't want PCSB to send your discipline data to OSSI, you will be responsible for ensuring that you are compliant with OSSI's end-of-year collection. Once you're satisfied with your declaration, so once this says what you want it to say, you click Submit, and then you are done. You have your sharing declaration, and that is that for this school year. If you want more information, there's a little more in the guidance document, so the screenshots are there, and you can see that there. All right. Next, we're going to talk about the monthly upload steps. So this is where if you are a returning data manager and you've already done this, you can kind of just skip through this, or you can watch it quickly. It shouldn't be that much different than what you are used to. But if you're new, please keep listening. All right, so each month, LEAs must submit discipline data that occurred in the previous month. And these are the 5 key steps. So we're going to go through each of these in more detail. First, you need to download and complete the discipline data template. So you go to your handy dandy discipline hub, only now you're going to go where it says download the discipline template. I would recommend downloading the Excel version, though you can download a CSV if that's your preference, but the Excel version is going to look like this. And the nice thing about the Excel version is you have drop-down menus and you have color coding. Any field that is green like this is required. So if you submit your discipline data and you, for instance, leave out the USI, we're not going to be able to do anything with that. It's going to get rejected. You'll see that some fields are light green, like date, written justification provided to parent. That's because it is sometimes required. If you say yes here, if you say yes, written justification was provided, then you must provide the date. But if you say no, then obviously there is no date. The same is true over here. If this represents an interim removal, you must fill out all of these light green fields. However, if it's not an interim removal, then you just leave these all blank. That's why they are light green, because they are sometimes required. Now, anything with orange here means that there's a specific set of values that will be expected and accepted. So like reason student was disciplined. There's a long menu of reasons you can select, and you have to pick one of these. If you say something else, it's going to get rejected. If you want to learn more about these, you can see data element descriptions. The discipline reasons list, because there's so many options, has its own tabs, so you can read these to understand all the different definitions. Same with weapon type list. But basically, you pull down the template, you fill it out, reflecting all of your incidents for the previous month. All right, so let's say you've downloaded it, you've completed the template, and you're ready to upload. To upload the file to the hub, again, go to the discipline dashboard and click Upload Discipline Data. You'll be able to choose the file and then click Save and Close. Now, not everyone, I think, is familiar with this, but if you click, so once you're done, if you click Review Queued Discipline Uploads, you can actually see what you have submitted. And you can, for instance, if you upload a file and then you realize it's not the right file or you want to make changes, you can delete it and upload a new version using the Review Queued Discipline Uploads. All right, so you've completed the template, you've uploaded it to the hub. The next morning, you are going to check the LEA data dashboard. And why I say the next morning, all files are processed one time at the end of the night. So once you upload it, it does not automatically go through our system because there are a lot of moving pieces in the database. So everything gets processed one time at night. So the next morning, you need to go in to the LEA dashboard and see if your records have gone through. Records that have successfully uploaded will appear here, and any records that were rejected will appear here. So hopefully, if you've done everything right, all of your records will be here, and none will be here. But let's say some have been rejected. If you see records here from last night's upload, you need to correct the errors and re-upload, and then basically repeat the process. So let's talk about common errors. So I have a screenshot here of our some of the fields in our template to talk about some common errors we tend to see. So reason student was disciplined. You can see in this example, there's like bullying, school threat, fighting. All of those are good. Those are applicable values that are accepted by our system. But then you can also see that the person has put talking back, disrespect, rude to teacher. These are not acceptable values. These are not part of the drop-down. So if you say these, those are going to get rejected. Another common error we see is that someone will say, yes, the student willfully caused bodily injury, but then under injury type will say no injury. So if the student caused bodily injury, there must be some sort of injury. So you need to state the severity. Was it a minor or severe injury? So this can cause your value, your rows to be rejected. Another common error we see is with a duration. Let's say you say 1 day. Okay, you can't have any text in here. This has to be a number. So it's assumed to be in increments of 1 day. So you can say 0.5 for half a day. You know, if you're reporting an involuntary dismissal. Otherwise, you can say like 1, 1.5, 2, any number, but it cannot be 1. It cannot be 1 day. It can be 1, it cannot be 1 day. You can't have any text there. Another common error we see, the end date must be on or after the start date. So if this student's exclusion started on 9/15, it couldn't have ended on 9/13, assuming they don't have a time machine. So it's got to be on or after start date. Another common error, like I just said, if written justification was provided, if you say yes here, then you have to provide the date. So if this is yes, then this has to be filled out. Same with interim removal. If you say yes, this was an interim removal, you have to fill out all of these fields as well. You cannot leave them blank. So these are all things that might cause your record to be rejected. So if a record is rejected, it's going to show up here. You'll see information about why that record was rejected. Now, it's not going to reject the whole file. So let's say you upload 15 records and one has a problem. The 14 that are good are going to go through and they're going to show up here. It's just the one is going to get rejected here. So you go through, you make the corrections, and then you upload it again using the same process as before. Wait a day and check. Now, I will note that submission errors persist. So like if you had an issue on Tuesday, then you go in and you correct it and you're checking on Wednesday, the issue from Tuesday is still going to be here. It doesn't disappear because there's no way for it to know like, oh, the new record that you submitted corrects this error. But you should see on Wednesday morning, the record appears here. So as long as there's no new errors Wednesday morning and the record is now appearing here, you know that all of your records are there. And you can always check by saying review all data submitted this year to make sure all of the records that you expect to be uploaded are in fact uploaded. All right, finally, let's say you have done all that and you've made sure all your records are there. You click complete once the data have all successfully uploaded. So you click complete and then you are done for that month. So those are all of the steps that you need. We've discussed pretty much the bulk of what you're going to see in the submission guidance document. I would definitely encourage you to read it because there is a little more detail, but it has a lot of these same screenshots, how to change your errors, how to certify your data. Now, the only other thing that is covered here that I'll just touch on briefly is the scope. You have to report all of your out-of-school suspensions, involuntary dismissals, involuntary transfers, and expulsions. You have to report all of those to DC PCSB. Starting this year with the new creation of the exclusion code, you have to report exclusions as well. So we expect to see all of those, any of those incidents that you have at your LEA must be reported to PCSB. As I mentioned earlier, in-school suspensions and school-based interventions are not required to be reported to PCSB, though OSSI will ask you for these. So if you want to just prepare for that throughout the year, you're certainly welcome to include those in your submission to PCSB. Our guidance also covers a little bit about how to handle single incidents with multiple consequences. So students who are suspended pending an expulsion hearing, students who receive a partial and full day suspension. So definitely check those out. And the last thing I want to quickly touch on, we cross-reference the discipline data that you submit to us with your attendance and enrollment data. So let's say you submit a suspension for a student, but it predates the student's entry date in your enrollment data, for example. Or let's say you say a student was suspended out of school for 5 days, but for some reason in your attendance data, the student was marked present on all 5 of those days. Those are things that could trigger a conflict. And so we make an error report available to let you see those. You can learn more about, I'm not going to cover that here, but on the Discipline Hub, if you click on Training Manual, you can learn more about that. I will note, at this time, we have not gotten full clarity on OSSI's expectations of what an attendance code will look like during exclusion, particularly since OSSI is not using partial day attendance codes this year. So we are still looking for clarity for that. At this time, we're not planning on doing exhaustive checks of attendance data during exclusions because we know a lot of unusual circumstances are likely to arise this year. So stay tuned for more information on that. But for now, you should now know everything that you need to complete the discipline data submission for school year 2021. If you have any questions, my email address is jtaguding@dcpcsb.org. You can also submit a hub ticket using the discipline category. So thank you very much for watching this video, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I look forward to working with you this year.